What would you do if the love of your life walked away at the altar and then knocked on your door 62 years later? That question has lived inside me like a heartbeat I could never quiet. I'm 86 years old, and yet that day feels close enough to touch. The flowers, the music, the friends whispering about marriage, forever, promises. My suit too tight, my hands shaking, my heart full of love and certainty. Then a message passed through the church like a cold wind. She was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. Just the echo of footsteps and a future collapsing in front of everyone. Let me break the ice by saying this the only way I know how. Even after decades, some moments never age. You think time will heal humiliation, betrayal, the loss of a bride at the altar. But time doesn't erase. It teaches you how to carry things. I tried to stand tall that day, to smile, to pretend the world hadn't cracked, but inside I was a 24-year-old man, asking why love had vanished in a single breath. Marriage, love, secrets, reconciliation. Back then they were beautiful words. After that day, they became questions I couldn't answer. Life went on, or so I told myself. But that unfinished story shaped everything. How I trusted, how I loved, how I avoided talking about altars, vows, forever. I learned to joke about it, to call it bad luck, yet every anniversary season tasted like metal in my mouth. Why did she leave? Was it fear, betrayal, family secrets, or something darker I never saw coming? I built my life around not knowing, around silence that stretched over decades. And then, last week, someone knocked on my door, and the past walked in with gray hair, trembling hands, and the same eyes I once promised forever. She said my name like a prayer and a confession at the same time. My first instinct was anger, my second was grief, my third was something frighteningly close to love. How do you speak after 62 years of unanswered questions? How do you face a ghost who isn't a ghost anymore? She told me she had come back because the truth could no longer stay buried, that there were reasons, hidden pressures, sacrifices I never knew. And suddenly the story I'd told myself for a lifetime began to shake. I won't finish that thought yet. The answers are coming, but not all at once, because they didn't come to me all at once either. This is a story about marriage and loss, about secrets that outlive youth, about the possibility, maybe even the danger, of reconciliation in old age. And it starts with that empty altar and a door opening 62 years too late. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something important. Stories like this are not just about me. They're about love, marriage, loss, forgiveness, and the secrets that shape entire lives. If you've ever carried unanswered questions, if you've ever wondered what you would do in my place, tell me in the comments. Your perspective matters, and reading each story helps others realize they're not alone. Leave a comment and share what part of this resonates with you so far, or what you think you would have done at that altar, or at that door 62 years later. Understanding stories like this helps us understand our own relationships, our own choices, and the time we still have to make them right. If you're finding value in this journey, tap the like button so this story reaches more people who might need it. And if you want to follow the rest of this confession, the twists, the answers, and what came after that knock on my door, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters of this life story. How does a life keep moving when the loudest question in it is never answered? After the altar, after the whispers, after the pitying looks faded, there was a long, heavy quiet that settled into my days. Silence has weight. It sits at the breakfast table. It rides in the passenger seat. It follows you into sleep. I worked. I laughed at the right moments. I learned how to be fine. But every year felt slightly out of alignment, like a picture hung just a bit crooked on the wall. People said I was lucky to be young, that someone else would come along, that time heals. Time didn't heal. Time rearranged the pain until it felt ordinary. I built routines because routines don't ask questions. I poured myself into work because work accepts whatever you give it. Birthdays came and went, Friends married, families formed, and I clapped, smiled, gave toasts. But on quiet nights, when the house was still, I'd replay the same fragments: the aisle, the altar, the vanished bride, the unfinished promise. That single moment stretched into years, then decades, a shadow that didn't darken everything but touched everything. It shaped how I spoke about love, carefully, indirectly, as if it might break if I held it too tight. I tried dating, good women, kind conversations, dinners that should have led somewhere, yet I always held something back, without meaning to. It's hard to build new walls when an old door is still open, even if no one walks through it. Trust became complicated. I smiled easily and trusted slowly. People assumed it was my nature. It wasn't my nature. It was my history. The truth is, when someone leaves you without a word, you start listening for footsteps in every relationship afterward, waiting for the sound of someone else walking away. Years turned into decades the way seasons change, gradually, then suddenly. I watched my hair gray, my hands wrinkle, my world quiet down. And still, the question remained, like a book left open on a table no one ever closed. Was it betrayal? Was it fear? Was it love twisted into something it couldn't survive? I told myself the answer no longer mattered, but the heart keeps its own records, and it does not misplace unfinished business. Then, after 62 years, a simple knock at my door said what silence never could. The past was not done speaking. What happens to love after it's interrupted before it even begins its real life? People assume the heart simply replaces what it loses, like buying a new lamp when the old one breaks. But the heart doesn't work that way. After the altar that never became a marriage, I tried. I truly did. I went on dates. I met wonderful women. I shared meals, stories, smiles. Some of them wanted a future. Some of them deserved one with me. But every time love reached for me, it brushed against a door I had never closed, and I pulled back without understanding why. I wasn't cold, I wasn't cruel, I was unfinished. There is a difference. When you carry an unanswered story, every new chapter feels like writing over something instead of turning the page. I'd sit across from someone kind, someone patient, and some small part of me would still be standing in that church wondering what I had done wrong. It wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't fair to me. But grief doesn't ask for permission. It plants roots in the places you least expect. There were almost proposals, almost families, almost the sound of children in hallways that never became mine. I watched friends build entire lives around wedding photos and anniversaries. I built mine around what if. What if she hadn't left? What if I had mattered enough? What if the story had gone differently? That quiet chorus followed me through decades, and though I lived a full life on the outside, there was always a room inside me I never unlocked. Sometimes, people think betrayal is loud, dramatic, explosive. But the deepest kind is subtle. The version that leaves you doubting your own worth, your own judgment, your own ability to be chosen. I became careful with my heart, careful with promises, careful even with hope. Careful can look wise, but often it's just fear wearing a suit and calling itself maturity. And yet, I never hated her. Not really. I was angry, yes. I felt small, yes. But underneath all of that was something stubborn. Love that had nowhere to go and refused to die just because time told it to. That love didn't stop my life, but it shaped it. Like a river bends around a stone it can't move. So my story became one of companionships instead of commitments, closeness without complete surrender, affection always held an inch away from the flame. Then, 62 years later, that inch disappeared with a knock on my door. The woman who defined every almost in my life was suddenly not a memory but a presence, breathing, speaking, older like me, and carrying her own ghosts. The loves that never fully happened gathered in the room with us, silent witnesses to the life I'd lived without her, and the life I might have lived with her. What would you do if the past you'd learned to live beside suddenly wrote its name across your present? I was 86, living a quiet life made of routines and doctor's appointments, morning coffee, and the soft hum of a house that had learned my footsteps. Then one afternoon, tucked among bills and advertisements, there was an envelope with handwriting I had not seen in more than 6 decades. My hands trembled before my mind even caught up. Memory recognized her before reason did. I stared at that letter for a long time. Age teaches you to be careful with your heart, even when it has already been broken and mended 100 times in invisible ways. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to protect the thin peace I had finally made with not knowing. Another part of me, the younger man who never left that church, was wide awake again, desperate for a single honest sentence. Why? When I finally opened it, the room felt smaller, like time itself had leaned in to listen. Her words were simple. No poetry, no drama, just the gravity of truth delayed for a lifetime. "I'm sorry," it began, and my chest tightened because apologies that come after 62 years are heavier than any anger. She wrote that she had lived with the weight of that day every single one of those years. That she had been young, frightened, pressured by things I never saw, trapped by secrets that were not hers alone to reveal. She said she was ill now, not dying, just aware of the clock, and she could no longer bear the silence between us. I set the letter down and walked through my house as if everything inside it had changed shape. Old photographs looked different. Mirrors reflected not only age lines, but unanswered decades. I felt something unexpected. Not rage, not relief, but a deep aching tenderness for the boy I had been and the woman she had become. It struck me that life had not just happened to me. It had happened to her too, with all its sharp turns and private storms. The next line undid me. She wrote, "If you don't wish to see me, I understand. But if you can, I would like to look you in the eyes once more." It's strange how a single sentence can reopen every room in your memory. I thought about the marriage that never was, the life that never unfolded, the children we never had, the birthdays unshared, and the quiet mornings that existed only as possibilities. And yet, standing there as an old man, I realized this wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about whether I was willing to face the truth, whatever it turned out to be. That night, I barely slept. I wasn't deciding whether to forgive. I was deciding whether I had the courage to listen. To risk finding out that the story I'd built my life around might have been incomplete or even wrong. Sometimes, we cling to our pain because it's familiar, because rewriting the past means rewriting who we became in response to it. But the letter sat on my table like a doorway, and I knew doors like that do not stay open forever. So I answered her. My hand shook as I wrote, but my words were clear. I said yes. I didn't recognize my own heartbeat when I saw her again. It was strange how the room seemed to hold its breath with me. 62 years had folded and unfolded between us, and yet there she was at my door, smaller than I remembered, older like me, but unmistakably the same woman who once walked toward an altar and never arrived. For a second, I felt 24 again, and 86 at the same time. The past and present collided in my chest, and neither one asked permission. We just stood there, looking at each other, the way people do when there are too many words and none of them feel big enough. Her hands trembled, not from age alone. She said my name. I didn't know whether to step closer or step away. Part of me wanted explanations, sharp and clean. Another part feared them. What if the truth hurt more than the not knowing? What if it changed the story I'd carried my whole life? What if it changed me? We sat at my kitchen table, the same place where I'd eaten alone for years, and suddenly every chair felt occupied by ghosts. The bride she was, the groom I was, the life we didn't live. She apologized again, this time with a voice that cracked on the edges. I listened, because even anger grows quiet in the presence of time. Then she told me the first piece of the truth, not all of it, just enough to tilt the floor under me. There had been someone else involved back then, a secret that wasn't hers to reveal, a threat that made her believe walking away was the only way to protect me. It wasn't the story I'd rehearsed in my mind for decades. It was messier, more human, and somehow more painful and more tender at once. I expected to feel triumphant or shattered. I didn't. I felt stunned by how complicated love becomes when it survives inside silence. We laughed once, awkwardly, at how old we both are and how young our memories still behave. Then came another twist I hadn't anticipated. She didn't come to rewrite the past. She didn't come to reclaim a wedding day. She came because she didn't want to die with a lie between us. Because she wanted me to have the truth even if it made everything heavier before it made anything lighter. The sun moved across the table while we talked. And still, not everything was said. There were more layers, more secrets, more reasons that would take time to unfold. And beneath all of it, a question neither of us dared to say out loud. After everything, what do we do now? With the years left, with the love that never fully disappeared, with the hurt that never fully healed. The truth didn't arrive in a single sentence. It came in waves, each one pulling another hidden piece of the past to the surface. She sat across from me, gathering courage the way you gather breath before diving underwater. Then she said the words that rewrote 62 years of my life. She hadn't left because she stopped loving me. She left because she was told that if she married me, my life would be ruined by a secret I didn't even know existed. Back then, her family carried a problem they were desperate to hide. Debts, a scandal, and a man in their orbit who had power and no conscience. He'd made it clear that marrying me would drag me into consequences I wasn't prepared for. She believed disappearing was the only way to keep me safe, even if it shattered us both. I felt the room tilt. For decades I had lived with one story, rejection, and suddenly I was staring at another story entirely, sacrifice. That realization didn't erase the hurt, but it changed its shape. Here was the first twist I hadn't expected. The villain in my memory wasn't love. It was fear wrapped in pressure, youth, and silence. She told me she tried to come back a year later, but by then my anger had turned into a wall she didn't know how to climb. Another twist. There had been a second letter that never reached me, lost somewhere between postmarks and time, and an entire life branched from that missing piece of paper. She also confessed something softer and heavier. She had married no one. People had assumed she rebuilt her life elsewhere, but she hadn't. She said she carried our unfinished story the way someone carries an old injury. It doesn't stop you from walking, but it changes how you move. That confession broke something open in me. I realized we had both grown old in the shadow of the same day, just on opposite sides of the same door. It wasn't betrayal against love. It was betrayal against time, against the life neither of us learned how to reach for again. We sat quietly after that, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full of what-ifs, full of years, full of the knowledge that truth heals slowly, like light entering a room that has been dark for too long. I didn't rush to forgive, and she didn't rush to justify. We just let the truth stand between us, finally spoken, finally shared, fragile and undeniable. And underneath it all was the question growing louder with every breath. Now that we finally knew the truth, what would we do with the time we had left? What do you do when life hands you back a story you thought was over? Sitting across from her, I realized we weren't just two old people sharing tea. We were the sum of every choice we made and every choice we were too frightened to make. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a slow, careful unlocking of doors you once swore would stay shut. I looked at her hands, older, lined, familiar, and I saw not the girl who left, but the woman who had carried 62 years of silence on her back. We talked about the lives we didn't live, the children we never had together, the arguments we never resolved, the anniversaries that never happened. It hurt in a strangely gentle way, like pressing a bruise you didn't know was still there. I told her the truth I had never spoken, that I had loved her longer than I meant to, longer than was reasonable, longer than I admitted even to myself. She cried in that quiet, trembling way age teaches you. No drama, just overflow. Then came the question neither of us could outrun. Were we here to say goodbye properly, or to begin something in the time we had left? At our age, every decision is measured against the clock. Love in your 20s is about forever. Love in your 80s is about today. Could we build something new on old foundations? Could we trust ourselves not to break under the weight of what we had already lost? Or was the truest act of love finally releasing each other from a story that had defined us for too long? I realized something then. Reconciliation doesn't always mean returning to the past. Sometimes it means making peace with it. Sometimes it means standing beside someone who shaped your life and saying, "We survived it." Other times it means daring, despite age, despite fear, to choose each other again, not as the people we were, but as the people time has carved us into. She reached across the table and took my hand. Not with the urgency of youth, but with the calm of someone who knows how precious and fragile every remaining moment is. We walked outside together. The world looked strangely new, like it does after a long storm. We didn't decide everything that day. We didn't need to. What mattered was this. The secrets had ended, the silence had broken, and the choice, whatever it would be, was finally ours. Not stolen by fear, not dictated by anyone else. Whether it becomes a final farewell, a gentle friendship, or the bravest late love story of our lives, it will be chosen with open eyes. If you stayed with me until the end of this story, thank you. It means you understand that love, marriage, loss, secrets, and reconciliation do not belong only to the young. They continue shaping us even in old age. If this journey touched something in your heart, I'd like to ask you for 3 small things. First, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories we share. Stories about long lives, difficult choices, late confessions, and the surprising ways love returns when we least expect it. Second, leave a like. It helps this video reach others who may need to hear that it is never too late to seek truth, forgiveness, or peace. And third, if you are here at the very end, write this in the comments so I know you made it. Time still matters. Tell me what you felt, what memories this awakened, or what choice you would make in my place. And before you go, watch the next video that is appearing on your screen right now. Another true life story that might stay with you long after it ends.